Hello, reanimated fans. Welcome to this week's episode. We're actually getting this one out because there's some travel plans and things like that. So, no news on this one, but I am joined, as always, by my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
G'day, mate.
And I'm H.A. Conrad, and we are going to be talking today about the episode 18 of season 11, last season of The Walking Dead, called A New Deal. And this is a continuation that I, spoiled in the last episode. Or started to spoil in the last episode of our last bit of this final season of Walking Dead before all the spinoffs and other projects happen. And so where we left off, we had a standoff in the in the Stewarts. Yes. No,
Yes.
a standoff in the sewers with, Hornsby and Daryl and Maggie and Carol and Governor Milton and Mercer come in to change that entire dynamic.
But first, we have another montage.
Yep.
Which I think is just going to be how they open all these episodes. Yeah. And again voiced by, I believe, by Judith. I can't really tell the difference between her voice and Gracie's at this point. So if they use another young actor, I might not get it right. But I feel like it's Judith, and she's talking about, like, I don't think people go away when they die. And she's not talking about zombies. I think she's talking about, like, the memory and the legacy. But there's a bunch of shots of Daryl's hair journey and his motorcycle enthusiasm and his brother.
I was hoping to see more of his vest journey, because that vest, and they put that into this episode.
It's pretty iconic in this episode. That right. And the Python get reintroduced in this episode. The Python being Rick's old gun.
Yep.
Get reintroduced in this episode, and it feels like these are like shots that you would see in a 2-page spread in a comic book in a way.
Yeah. And I really like that. Again, man, this show has been on a while. We've all aged like twice over since the pandemic. So yeah, maybe that's part of it. But it was cool seeing some of those shots and seeing, again, the journey of his hair, the journey of his grime. Nobody does dirty, weird hair like Daryl.
Nope. Norman Reedus probably has a patent on it at this point.
And so that's kind of cool. I guess, my thing about all of this stuff with the Commonwealth and things that you and I have been frustrated with is that one of the things, and this, I don't know that it comes through, maybe it does come through in this episode, there's a lot of sort of unlikely things that happen with these characters that I don't think that they would tolerate in a normal scenario. Like, I guess you can make hay on the fact that they're in this civilized place with medical care, with other things, and they do play upon this theme quite a bit in this episode with various characters. But it's sort of like, okay, we're in yet another community where it seemed like things were going well, but things aren't what they seem. There's a corrupt element. There's always this element of power where, somebody is getting taken advantage of, and, are we going to try to help this community like we did with others, or are we just going to like accept it, or are we going to leave? Like, there's a lot of that dynamic going on that I don't know that they successfully resolve. But so I wanted to see what you thought about that.
Yeah, I would say right off the bat, they do not resolve it. But I think that this was the first time we've seen this kind of dialogue and plot happening on this show. It's a very familiar trope, the about to collapse community. But I think where they're like disrupting that is we have multiple characters who are not talking with each other, talking about how this place is going to fall apart, and we can change that, and we can help. And I think that is that's a pretty cool message that you don't see often in this genre. And so I liked that, and I like the fact that it was not just Judith. It was also Ezekiel. It was Gabriel. I feel like those were the main three who all had like a scene where they were talking about wanting to make a difference. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. And Max. I think you have Max and Eugene
yeah,
too.
But Max isn't going to leave. Like Eugene tries his best to like get her to come away, but she's not going to leave because, well, her brother is General Mercer. And Yumiko has also said she's not going to leave because her brother Tommy is that baker / surgeon. But she's not in this episode.
Who we've not seen again. We just hear him mentioned.
He's probably just still working on his accent.
Maybe. But I mean, look, I don't see, like, the thing is with him, I think he would absolutely leave in a heartbeat. Like I think he's very tired of being in this weird scenario and
As
seems
long
to
as he
be.
doesn't have to be a doctor, he will go wherever you ask him to go, right? Can I
Yeah.
just bake? Do you guys have any flour? We have a windmill. I mean,
Frost cakes. That's just what I want to do. But anyway, I liked how they examined it. I liked that there was an awareness that they knew that they had seen this before and that this community was collapsing. I think the one thing that just didn't feel like, and this is again, I think this is the pandemic issue with filming and whatever. You never get the sense of the sort of like numbers in this community. We just see these weird little square like photos of, or like scenes of the square where all the action tends to happen.
yep.
And you
And to
know,
just to reiterate, this is the square of a town of 10,000 people,
right,
maybe pre-pandemic, and yet they've said that there's 50,000 people in the
right,
Commonwealth.
right. And so, and this is the central place, and I get it again that there were limitations and things that they had to do, but it still feels very sparsely populated. In a way that makes it feel like, and the reason why I bring this up is that it makes the stakes feel a lot lower because you're only seeing like this sliver of the population, and it's like, well, that shouldn't be that much to manage, and it makes it a little bit hard to understand why Milton like is like, oh, I want this power. It's like, well, what power? You've got this like weird little square with ice cream. That's it. Like it's just
It's
kind
what
of
the ice cream represents, AJ.
I guess,
It represents refrigeration,
but
lots of
anyway,
ingredients.
but taking that aside, what they are really portraying with Milton, with the deal that Carol made with her, which we find out about it at the beginning of this episode, is that she wants to continue this legacy, which she does feel like she feels very strongly that like she was meant to do this, even though she didn't choose it. It's her duty to do it. So there's like this weird mishmash of like this is sort of like the familial thing that we're supposed to be leaders,
Yeah,
but
like
also
where did this, I mean, I guess they're establishing that it's a dynasty,
right,
that her father was a president of the United States. Maybe when the apocalypse happened,
right.
we don't
And
really
that her
know the timeline.
grandfather was also, yeah, like just
Well, I
there
think
was
when she talks about grandfather, she's talking to Sebastian about
right, but
her father.
there's this implication that this isn't just her dad, like this was like
Yeah,
back
they're a Kennedy. They've already
or a
kind of
Bush
done some of
or
the work.
whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it, a Bush family, Kennedy, whatever legacy you want to talk about.
But just to go back to the beginning of the episode real quick, where Daryl does eventually give in and hands Hornsby over to Milton and Mercer and Carol and Negan, who all just randomly showed up in this
Yep,
sewer.
his sewer.
Uh, but he doesn't do it without stabbing him through the hand.
Yeah.
First, adding just one more wound to Hornsby. He is starting to feel kind of like a punching bag
Yeah.
of a bad guy. But the thing is, he's never, other than the pain and like when he is occasionally scared, he's almost always very calm and collected.
Yep.
Especially later in the jail scenes, even though he's been through all this stuff, he's still just kind of like, yeah, I've got the upper hand. And he has that scene after they make the deal with Mercer, where he's telling Mercer, like, yeah, go do your job. And he's the one who's zip tied.
Yep.
Which is kind of just incredible. I mean, I guess it's more Josh Hamilton just being like a good bad guy. But I thought that those were pretty crazy scenes. It's not till he's talking to Milton and then gets some weird like sex look on his face.
Yeah.
That you're like, oh, okay. Oh, what's going on over here? And she seems to be able to pull his strings and push his buttons quite well, and also maybe was his lover sometime.
Probably. Um, but again, he plays this character really well, really creepy. And in part that is like that weird calm that he's got going on and that weird control. He plays that to the hilt, and I think he does a good job.
And just the line that they wrote for her to give him in that scene where she calls him an angry, delusional little boy trying to win a game but not realizing you've never been a player, I just thought was good writing, really good between those two characters. And of course the weird sex face thing kind of just took it to a different place. But what are you gonna do? You can't have it all.
But I did like, you know, you see there's a trust that they show um with Daryl and Carol again, where, you know, she's done this deal with Milton and he's just like, God, what did you do? You know, and it's this moment where he's just like, gosh, Carol again, you know, like we had a plan here. And
Yeah, is this going back to like her stuff with Alpha? Is he still?
yeah, kind of.
I guess so, huh?
I think that that was the implication there. However, he does trust her and he's like, God, you know, I fine, I'll just stab this guy through the hand to make myself feel better,
I
but
mean,
fine.
in a way, he's the one who's acting more irrational than she. Oh, I don't know. Why does he want to kill Hornsby so badly? His Hornsby, I guess he's threatened everybody, but he?
Yeah, and he's threatened his kids, which is the big
Yeah,
with him, I think.
yeah.
That's his issue. And um, you know, his feeling, I think, is that the only good Hornsby is a dead Hornsby and he's dangerous. And so but the fact that, you know, and they come up with this whole plan to make Hornsby the scapegoat, which is not a bad plan, except Hornsby is definitely so schmarmy and he's been doing some things. I do feel like Milton and others might have been, and honestly, Mercer probably, given the stuff that's been happening with Hornsby, I feel like they may have done a little bit. They should have, and probably, I think, if things were realistic, would have done a little bit of due diligence about what was happening with him and trying to figure out what his little nefarious things are. And he even says this to Milton, is that, you know, during their creepy little conversation, that, oh, she doesn't have an awareness of these things that are happening. And she dismisses him with that line and just like, yeah, I got this covered. And I don't, again, just given how they have created her character, I feel like that doesn't ring true to me. I feel like she
Yeah.
would have run down every lead to make sure, because she came so close to losing control and losing power, she's going to want to make sure that it's fully in her grip again, right?
It's clearly, this episode makes it very clear that her leadership is not nearly as secure as she seems to think it is, too.
Right. So
Um,
I feel like they missed an opportunity to sort of show
that she's working
how,
harder to like,
right,
yeah, to save it all.
right.
Yeah, because he does basically threaten her with like, but he's very vague. He's just like, some alliances and things will be in trouble if I am not here to keep it going. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, okay, I don't know what that means.
But I'm
Bye,
just going to
Hornsby.
let this go and walk away.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So then there's like this weird public hearing where Hornsby she lays everything at his feet. And there's a bunch of Alexandrian Kingtop people there, um, who apparently had just been let in
Yeah.
because they were never there before, like Lydia,
Yep.
Elijah, Maggie, I think, is everybody's there. Like everybody's brought in. And this is part of the payoff, right? This is part of the deal that Carol has made. And it becomes clear as we go through the episode that they're gonna get supplies and then left to their own devices, assuming that they're willing to hand over Horn. In a way, this is kind of a great deal for them. Milton already has Hornsby. She doesn't need to
Mm-hmm.
treat them the way that she does. Like she could just say, all right, I got what I need. I've got my scapegoat. Goodbye. You guys.
Yeah, except that they've been showing that they can cause trouble, and I think she just wants to possibly wash her hands of it.
But she's not forcing them to leave. She's
Right,
letting them leave, right?
right,
So
right.
if she did want to wash her hands of these meddlesome
She would just
kids,
make them leave, right?
she
She'd make
could just
everybody.
banish them. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah.
So I guess it's a good deal for them and not as savvy for Milton, unless she just thinks like she's going to buy all this goodwill by giving them supplies. And maybe she would because
Or she's just biding her time, which is probably more likely, is that she's going to wait till things are on more solid ground and then, you know, see what happens. And it's not like she doesn't have power because she still has her military and other things. And so maybe it's just that, okay, I'm going to table this for now and let them think this. And this sounds more like her to me. But also, she wants to maintain her power, she wants to maintain her grip. And to do that, she's got to maintain some control. And she, I think, recognizes that this group of people are rabble rousers. So you're right. I think it would make more sense if she was like forcing them out because she doesn't want them influencing. Because ever since she let them in the community, they've been doing these, the articles came out about the house and her son. And like, I feel like it's not over yet. Like, that's going to be
Yeah.
the tension.
Well, yeah, yeah.
And she even implies that with like, um, she was like talks to Yumiko about the fact that oh, your friend is this journalist, and oh, how do I trust you, and all this stuff. And then
That's
you know
such a BS answer, though. Like saying I
it
can't
is
trust my lawyer because she's friends with a journalist, then that just means you don't trust your lawyer, period. Because
right.
otherwise, you would believe that they have an oath and they have an attorney-client privilege and these kinds of things, right?
Yeah. The other thing that it's not, I get why they do it. And then there's, we see the payoff in this episode or whatever. But her sort of, I get it that it's a family dynasty and whatever, but her son has shown just such horrible, like, judgment, horrible decision making.
It's a hell of a blind spot for
It,
Milton. Yeah.
it, and it's a blind spot that I don't fully buy because she also recognizes that he is like absolutely a he is basically the person that could lose everything because of his behavior.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think she is going to try to coach him into being the next person. He's a liability on every level.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the other, like, they raise her up as this like very savvy person. I guess they're leaning really hard on the fact that, she's got a blind spot for her kid. And he tries to explain it a little bit by saying something like, oh, it really was supposed to be my brother, but I was one who survived. So I think they try to sort of like say, oh, well, I'm what's left. And so she's just going to take what she's going to get. But basically, all this incident caused her to come really close to losing everything. So I don't know that she's going to try to put him in a seat of power. What did you think about that? I mean, I just felt it was like a weird decision.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that this is a writer's room sort of, escape clause where they could say, "Oh, well, it's her kid, so she's not going to know how bad a decision she's making." But like every scene that she is in with Sebastian where she's trying to get him to read this speech, he is screaming and throwing a tantrum basically, and she like threatens him, but it doesn't really put him in order for very long. So yeah, I think it's unfortunately not like the best use of
But
plot here.
But he is such a mustache twirly little smarmy side villain that's the catalyst for Max's behavior, basically, because she's just like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
It
the
wasn't
idea of
clear in the course of how she was going ahead with her little like
the
sabotage plan how much other people were in on it. I guess
right.
Eugene ended up being in on it, but nobody else maybe. It's
It seemed like it was very much something that she came up with
on the
on
fly
her.
even. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's like a nice little move where she maneuvers him into just saying what he thinks about the system. And again, like this storyline is is so like socialist. It's pretty wild.
hmm I think we see a lot with and the payoff, I suppose, is that ultimately they take him out and he gets taken out in a way that I guess is sort of satisfying because he's so smarmy. But it's also like, even though he hasn't had that much experience dealing with walkers, I just don't know that it felt like it was like he was laying still for a really long time, allowing that walker to get a grip on him.
Yeah, it was a good comeuppance though. Well, I did want to talk about how we have some scenes here, and this is one of the scenes where Judith is giving Daryl a hard time about
Mhm.
basically how she's telling him he wants to run away and not help the Commonwealth. And that's all happening while we are watching Aaron, Jerry, Elijah, and Lydia get on a wagon and go to Oceanside to just check in on them. I think it's the first time Cindy has been mentioned in years,
Yeah,
uh,
definitely.
which I thought was kind of crazy because like the actor who played Cindy was in, I don't know what season that was, but it was when Tara went to Oceanside.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rebecca or Rachel, I forget if it's Rachel or Rebecca, but became the leader. And she's been the only person from Oceanside that we've really seen ever since. But they're going to go there. And Elijah and Lydia are now shacked up. There's some kind of dialogue between Lydia and different people about like, thank you and you're the best. No, you're the best. I don't know. What was your take on all of this? There was a lot of like kind of we're packing up, we're getting the hell out of here sort of stuff. But
There's
did you
a
have a
lot of
vibe on
that.
it?
Just even with the Lydia and Elijah thing, like it felt very like there were some good scenes, but some of it felt really like shoehorned in because we haven't seen these people for ages, and it was just kind of weird. And then the sort of debate, there is this conflict where it's like, do we stay and help this community? Well, no, we kind of want to go and get away, and we know this community that we already have, so we're just gonna like. It's almost like, do I have it in me to help yet another community that seems to be falling apart? And that's kind of the theme.
Don't they keep saying this isn't our problem anymore?
Yeah, a little bit of that. And so there are those things. And they highlight this with the conversations with Judith and Daryl, with a little bit with Lydia and Carol, definitely with Gabriel and Rosita. And so it's this debate that they're all having. And look, like we're also like, to me, this does make sense though, because look, there are these multiple communities that have been, it's like they've been there, done that. They've seen this multiple times.
But not on
And
this scale. I feel like that's got to be. Unfortunately, the show isn't doing the job of showing us the scale. But
mm,
Kingdom, Alexandria, Hilltop, Oceanside, all of them probably a few hundred people. If we, I don't know, even know anymore. Like since the Savior War, it's been really hard to figure out.
mhm.
But they are all on their last legs. But like less than 1,000 people between the three communities. But this is 50,000, and like on some level, at least what I would expect to be a plot point is how can we possibly hope to help these guys out? There's only like 8 of us.
Right.
That would be my expectation. That doesn't seem to come up, and also the show doesn't really want us to think about it in terms of that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing I thought about it was like the person it one of the little vignettes they use in this is with Negan and his wife, and looking at the ultrasound,
Yeah.
and realizing that there's something going on. And he makes a comment just about the fact, like, out of everybody, you would have thought that he would have been the one that, because he just doesn't trust these things. However, he is somebody that built a community and does see the value in those things, or did before, even if it's like a dysfunctional community. And so, I thought that that was an interesting juxtaposition that they threw in there. Just
Yeah.
the like his thoughts versus others,
And
especially.
her perspective that like Hornsby and the Commonwealth murdered her community.
Mhm. Um, which is interesting though, because the looking that's a very complex conversation, and you wonder how. I mean, I'm sure he told her some things, but this is something that he would do with his communities when he led a
Yeah.
community. He would torture and kill, and then bring them into the community, or bring some of them into the community. So that's like a really like, I sense that there's going to be a conflict. I also have to say that there is a lot of foreboding with this little family scenario they've created with him. I think we all know that something's going to happen. So it's kind of hard to, you don't want to get attached to her for that reason, but I do like how
Oh,
they're.
yeah. The fact that she's not on the poster art for their spin-off show.
Yes, exactly. And something's gonna have to happen. Um,
Uh,
so yeah. Um, I like, but I did like that specific scene because of the things that it uncovers and the complexities of what he is probably grappling with. we've seen him and they've built him in this way that this is something that's very important to him in a way that he's like actually pretty terrified, right? Like this is a different kind of Negan that we're seeing.
We believe that, though. Do you believe that he's
Well, I think that old Negan is still there and just ready to run, but there's a part of him that really is protecting like this woman and his child. But I think they're obviously gonna use that down the line to change some things, right? So,
yeah. No, I
anyway,
agree. That was an interesting scene. And just kind of also the realization that a lot of people have been doing home births, outside of places like Commonwealth. Maybe they had got like a midwife or a doula or something, but most people are just kind of knocking that out at home. One more thought going back to the cart of Jerry, Aaron, Elijah, Lydia driving off to Oceanside. Once again, Jerry's family, where are they? Why doesn't he get a goodbye? Like Gracie's there
right.
crying with Aaron. Where is Nabila and their 17 children? What happened? Why, Jerry? I know children
Yeah,
actors are expensive.
I know, but also they've used so many extras. You would have thought that they could have gotten them into this, right? Like, um, you know, gotten them into this episode at least a little bit because it does make you. It's like, did Jerry and Nabila
Did
have
they
a
have a
falling
fall?
out?
Yeah, is he not married
Like are they
anymore?
divorced now? I don't know. So it makes you wonder. Like, it's such a big hole that they don't even reference it. Like, even if they had just showed them on the wagons, that would have been fine, right? So
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you could have done it. Like just have like a bunch of faceless kids in the back, like in the way back of a background shot, like waving, or I don't know.
just
But
something. I mean, you could have done something, but
yeah,
anyway. Um, so that's kind of interesting that that's where they're going.
Carol goes to talk to Ezekiel, who's setting up for Founders Day, putting out his like petting zoo, which is like it's kind of cute, but it's also like dude used to have a tiger. Now he has
Yep.
goats and bunnies. But yeah, he's
Yeah.
also just like, I'm not leaving. I can make a difference here. This you guys gave me a second chance, and I'm going to use it to help
Yep.
this kingdom
Yep.
before it falls. And I thought that was pretty great. I also
And
like the fact that
very on brand for him, right? Like this is
he,
totally in line with
well,
what we know about him.
and it's like a reborn version of him where he's not pining for her anymore,
Hmm.
and not morose. And so I think this is a version of Ezekiel that we all like. And even though Carol is a little bit like hurt, or yeah, she's a little sad that he doesn't want to come with. I don't know. Is she putting out some mixed messages?
She is, but she also always wants it all, you know.
Yeah,
That's on brand for Carol, I'd say.
but he's not coming. We know that he's not coming. We know that Judith wants to stay and help, and I think we've had the Gabriel discussion. No, it's happening later when
Hmm.
he's like redelivering his sermon that he'd already delivered. I don't know why he did that, but he was feeling very he was having second thoughts about leaving, and feeling like he had kind of refound his faith and refound his flock and doesn't want to abandon them. I don't feel like they really finished that conversation, because then they hear Judith come in the window, and then by the time Daryl gets to the church, they're gone. Him and Rosita.
Right. Also, can we talk about Judith coming in through the window? It's like very odd.
She's such a scamp.
You're such a scamp, but also, you could have stealthily come in and another, I don't know, it was just odd. But I did like the conversation between Gabriel and Rosita. And again, like I was sort of like there, if you remember what happened to Gabriel, even when we first met him, he's always had this, he lost his faith. He felt like he had abandoned his flock. Um, he had a lot of guilt, and we've seen him grapple with these things throughout the series. So I liked that this was a conversation that they were having. And so that was kind of a cool thing, but I agree it didn't feel fully, because they got interrupted, but it didn't feel like it was resolved. So maybe they'll come back to that.
I guess they'll have to. Another funny thing that happens in this episode is when Daryl realizes Judith is missing, he goes and talks to RJ, who is reading Invincible,
Yep.
which I was like, that is so inappropriate because of how
Right.
violent that
Yes.
comic is.
Like that kid should not, but again, look at the world
He
RJ.
he lives in a zombie
He lives
apocalypse,
in
so
his zombie apocalypse. I think that's probably, there's nothing in there he hasn't seen.
it's probably fine. Also, did Invincible exist before 2010? I kind of think it didn't,
I don't know.
but I thought that
Um,
was a cool shout out to Robert Kirkman.
yeah, I thought that was cool. So anyway, I thought that was um, pretty cool overall.
Carol
So
and Daryl are out looking for Judith before he finds her at the church, and she's like reminiscing about parenting and Sophia. And I thought that was actually quite touching, also. Like, you have a lot of, and I think this is Angela Kang having like, all these feelings about the show ending and putting it into the series. And so we have conversations like that, which I think are, maybe they've been having these all the time anyway, but they just didn't want us to keep hearing about Sophia because I'm sure Carol thinks about her all the time.
mhm.
But it's to me, it was kind of interesting to hear her talking about motherhood and being a good parent to Sophia.
I know. And I liked that. And I also, there's also a lot of things that we're talking about in terms of, Daryl's like, God, I'm terrible at doing this.
Oh yeah,
And
I have
he's
no
like,
idea what I'm doing.
yeah,
I
that's
hear
pretty
that
awesome.
that I hear that so much. I mean, yeah, that is everything. I mean, that's adulting in a lot of ways.
Right, right.
It's
So,
hard to say that to a kid
yep.
because but and yet, sometimes kids respond well to that.
But I do like how they come back full force with this later on, and there's a nice understanding between him and Judith. And there's also like with Judith has grown up in this apocalypse. There's the moment where he tries to give her the gun and she like doesn't want to take it because she wants to live in the world. Like it's a little bit of like wishful thinking, right?
Yeah.
On everybody's part that, oh, we could live in this different world. But at the end realizes the necessity of defending other people and her family, and she's good at doing that. And also just the understanding and the understanding she and Daryl come to together, which I thought was a really good moment between those two. And then when they get into the crowd of walkers in the sort of town square, um I did like how Judith took, she's like, okay, well, guess this isn't the world, so I'm gonna do what I gotta do.
That's a
The
whole lot of gun for a little girl, I'll tell you that much.
it is and a little bit, again, this is like a disbelief, like the kickback on that thing is probably not something a kid can handle.
No. I
But
miss I miss her katana or her little
yeah,
her
that was better.
short sword. I mean, I don't know where that is. Hopefully
Mm,
it's not like gone.
yeah. But I do like the look on her friend's face who's never had to deal with this. It's like,
Yeah, that was pretty good. And I mean, it was obvious, but because they had her like meet her at the ring toss and they
yeah,
had
yeah,
some like
yeah.
fun girl time. And then two scenes later, Judith is executing walkers with a massive gun, and her friend is like, "What?"
Right,
And Angela Kang talks about that like loss of innocence or loss of innocence that Judith is experiencing in those scenes, and I thought
right.
that was well done. And Hornsby's little crew of secret police continue to be real thorns. They have some sort of plan with him to
Yep.
let him out, but we don't really know how it's going to
We just know he's
unfold.
eating that delicious, delicious candied apple with a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah, and he's had
Um,
his interaction with Eugene and Max where he basically insinuates that he knew she was there and had maybe heard them coming because they weren't being very quiet, and doesn't give them anything they could really use, I feel like.
but also is threatening because he's basically like, I know that Max has been doing this subversive stuff, so it
Yeah.
wouldn't take much for me to out her and you to Milton. Um, and then she goes through with like her whole plan, because I do think that part of why she goes through with it is not just because she thinks it's for the good of the Commonwealth, but also because Hornsby is threatening her with this, and it's almost like, well, it's now or never. Like there's some, I think, idea that he's going to use that as a bargaining chip.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, it does kind of raise the stakes for her. So, but yeah, what else does she have on her that she could do? And it does, like, it is a little bit unrealistic that the Miltons have somehow secured their power base that quickly, going from like protests and riots and tear gas the night before.
Well, and with this population, would they believe this excuse? Would they believe this scapegoating? And that is the part that doesn't fully set well with me. But I mean, I will say that part of how they play this when Sebastian is doing his speech, and he actually starts to do a pretty good speech, which I think was the point, is that he could have probably faked it
Yeah.
enough, to get kind of continue the legacy. But, of course, Max plays the recording and it all goes to hell in a handbasket. But, there is skepticism even when he's talking. And it's really just like, I think that the sense of peace is very thin and easily broken, clearly is easily broken when this, when all hell breaks loose, after she plays a recording. But I don't think that it was fully put to rest. I think that they would like to think it is. And they did, they were talking about how Milton was playing everything perfectly, about, talking about Hornsby being the
Yeah.
cause of all of this. And I think maybe it could have gotten there if Max hadn't done this. And that's what she was afraid of. She was like, oh, we can't go back to doing this status quo thing. My eyes are open now. I can't just sit here and watch this little weasel come in, because he is bad news and he is somebody that's going to cause a lot of pain down the line. And so she views that as her responsibility, and I get that. So I thought that was okay. Again, I think that we just don't feel the sort of like the bigness of all of this community and how this is going down because of how they had to do it. And Angela Kane's even talking about how in the sort of after show, just how even with the Founders Day celebration in the comic books, it was actually football. And I did wonder about that, but I kind of figured it was because of pandemic. And indeed, she said it was because of the pandemic, because they had such specific things that they couldn't do. So they picked wrestling to make it more of like a pageantry thing, because you could kind of keep it limited. So
I
it
mean,
makes me
imagine how
sad.
many extras they would have needed to do a football game too.
Right.
That's
So that kind of makes me sad, just that, I think her vision probably had to shift a bit with how they're presenting this, and maybe doesn't have quite the impact because of that. But I think that they made choices. I do think the wrestling thing did work. So that was kind of nice. Just the idea of that being, okay, this is another manipulation that we're doing for the
mhm.
Founders Day thing.
And it
And
was like Captain Commonwealth or whoever was the winning
right, right,
wrestler, of
right.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So um
Um, yeah, I thought the way that the scene also kind of like unravels too after the speech, and then the recording is played, and then suddenly she's in the ring. I guess that's where the speeches were happening, maybe in the ring, and she's
mhm.
getting pelted with stuff from the crowd. It's a very, I mean, this episode ends while everything is still in complete chaos. There are walkers who have been attacking people. The citizens of the Commonwealth are predictably very bad at defending themselves, like in any community where people are allowed to go back to the way it was. This is a very old refrain for you and me, HA, where in the zombie apocalypse, where if anybody dies of a heart attack or whatever, they're a zombie now. Like nobody should be this incapable of defending themselves.
Yep, absolutely. And okay, and I can believe that maybe people are out of practice, but I think just from a survival instinct point of view, like not all these people were in this Commonwealth. You know what I'm saying? Like you
Right.
assume that they would be here from the beginning, that they wouldn't know how to do that, and that was a little hard to swallow.
Yeah, I don't remember in processing if there was like a oh no weapons inside the wire, if that was a rule, but it certainly seems to be the case. Like only the soldiers seem to have weapons. Nobody else even has knives. Although Daryl is wearing his giant knives and obviously has the python in the crowd. Wasn't sure if that was because he was expecting to leave right afterwards or what.
Yeah,
Um, but most people are not armed, and a lot of people are just getting like they fall down, and then there's like three of them who get big bites taken out of their backs. It's pretty some pretty good zombie biting stuff going on, which I enjoyed.
yeah,
um and I really, it was a little predictable, but so Sebastian catches up with Max, throws her at a zombie. Eugene saves her, throws the zombie back at Sebastian. It's kind of like a grenade,
I
the
know.
grenade trope, right? Except instead of having somebody to save him, Sebastian has nobody, and the people just kind of watch as the inevitable happens. He, however, is not dealt with at the end of this, so I don't know if we're going to see him as a zombie.
You might see zombie Sebastian. I think there has to be that, right? Where we see like probably Milton is going to come through and either deal with him, or like I think there has to be that thing.
Milton is a big question mark, and
Yeah,
the last thing we saw of her was getting pelted by bottles.
right.
The crowd has turned on her. She has certainly turned on it feels like she's about to turn on the crowd. She
Mhm.
still has some soldiers with her. She's telling Mercer that his job is to protect her, right? Which I thought was a nice little touch, that he's like, no, I have to save the people
Right.
of this community. And he's leaving her with soldiers, but it's just a matter of time before she tells her soldiers to turn their guns on the crowd, it feels like, right?
Yeah, totally. And their interactions are definitely like he's on her bad list now, right? Like she's not excited about what he has just said to her.
There's just this
So
massive disconnect between her and everybody around her,
mhm.
which is a little hard to like, completely do the math on that. I feel like part of me feels like the story of the 1%
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
really work in this, first of all, in this size of a community and in the post-apocalyptic setting.
right.
I just don't think people would put up with it. So it's been like a cool metaphor. That's part of the reason why I love this genre is you can lay all kinds of cool metaphor into the storytelling, and mostly it works. But I feel like they've leaned on this one a little too heavily,
Yeah, I agree.
because she does seem so disconnected, and I think that would be hard to do in this community.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely agree. Um, so any predictions about, I mean, I think for my predictions for the next episode, Milton's clearly going to be on the warpath to avenge. I don't know that like, sure, it'll be avenging Sebastian because that's kind of how they set it up, but I think basically avenging the fact that she's lost this power and maybe trying to grapple and get it back somehow.
Yeah, for this storyline, I think it's going to be very interesting to see. It'll be Hornsby versus Milton versus everybody.
Yep.
I think, or maybe
Or
yeah,
maybe
or
he bands back with Hornsby. Who knows? So
who knows. If you saw any of the coming up next time, it looks like there's going to be some Oceanside storytelling going on with Aaron, and maybe the reveal finally of these new types of zombies.
yes,
So
absolutely. Because they sort of teed that up in the sort of trailers for next time, right?
yeah, exactly. You have Aaron talking about, I've heard stories of zombies climbing over
It's like,
walls.
oh, have you heard tell, Aaron? Who did you hear this from?
Well,
I don't know, some French guy.
he used to travel a lot back in the day.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, suddenly this it does feel a little bit out of nowhere. But he's gonna be like, yes, of course. You haven't heard the tale of the zombies who can climb walls. They're called whisperers. I mean, first of all. But we'll see, right? So it's gonna be a couple of weeks before or maybe we'll miss 1 week, I think, until we can come back. And maybe I'll pull another episode out of the vault. I don't know. Do you want to listen to Days Gone By?
Mm.
The first ever episode of The Walking Dead, maybe as um, as a tasty treat. We'll see. But this has been it's always fun to be in The Walking Dead Prime. I hope that the new spinoffs can live up to this level. Angela Kang's moving on to new things. Gosh, I don't know who's doing the show running. Do we know who's doing the show running next year?
I don't think we do.
Well, maybe they can get her to come back and do some more, but she's probably pretty happy to be done with it and moving on to new projects.
She might be, although she really loves it. So again,
It
I think
comes across, doesn't it, in her after show
yeah,
explication?
like
Yeah.
she really loves it. And I appreciate all that she's doing, and I want to see her involved in so many different things. She's an amazing showrunner. So, you know,
Yeah.
maybe she'll come back for guest stuff here and there. Who knows? So,
Also, we didn't talk about this in the news, but there's a new Mike Flanagan show on Netflix right now.
oh,
Actually, I texted a friend of the show, occasional guest star Kyle Diaz, because he's such a Flanagan head. I don't know if there's
I
a
did not know about this,
it's
but
called The Midnight Club. You probably have seen previews or promos for it. But I'm definitely interested in watching it just to see if they have a lot of monologues.
oh yeah, I'm sure there are many monologues. But I will definitely check it out. Oh, look at there it is on Netflix.
Maybe you
And
can download a couple of episodes to watch on the plane.
maybe, but it sounds like I have a lot of things to catch up on right now. So
There.
I don't know yet. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Okay.
We'll see what I feel like binging.
Yeah. Well, bon voyage to you. Don't go to France. I hear that's where the scary zombies are.
Nope, no France in the cards for the strip. So
Terrific.
just, keeping it real.
And
Um, but if you would like to talk about your predictions or like let us know your thoughts about the end of this final season, these last episodes as we're talking about them, feel free to reach out to us on the Twitters, which is Reanimated PCast. You can also send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can just look us up and you can look at all the episodes up on Podbean. You have the address, Stuart, and I don't have that in my head yet. Sorry.
I don't even have it in my head. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you all as always for listening. Until next time, ciao.
Alrighty. Bye-bye, everybody. And it's reanimated.podbean.com.
Ooh, good catch. Good catch.
Okay.